operant conditioning is the most misunderstood concept in behavioral science and should never be used as a compass to judge how humane animal training is. I'm going to give you a link over here where you could dive deeper into it, called operantconditioning.info. I have all of my notes over here. I'm going to give a quick overview and the main issue with operant conditioning. The main issue with operant conditioning, which was explained to me best by Stephen Lindsay himself, who is the man who is the creator of the concept of LIMA in animal training, least intrusive, minimally aversive, which is used as a standard for judging animal training, is that operant conditioning only considers what the trainer is doing with the dog. It's just a descriptive terminology that explains what the trainer is given and taken away from the dog or the animal. It in no way explains how the animal is feeling. You can refer to a lot of marine animal training, which is where operant conditioning really became popular, especially with Karen Pryor, who was a marine trainer and brought the concepts into dog training and made it very popular, right? Like marine training, they're giving and taking away fish mostly for the animals to work with. However, lots of scientific literature, which is never really pointed to, not often enough, explains that you can really positive reinforcement for the marine trainers only work when there's also a flip side of an aversive environment, meaning the animals have to be in a state of deprivation. If they're not hungry and seeking to relieve the discomfort of hunger or the frustration of being bored in this pool, you cannot have effective positive reinforcement. So although for the sake of just encouraging behavior in a pretty benign environment, I can definitely get some, results from my dog over here. Yuri, come, good girl, for some treats, right? Good girl. She's very well fed and happy and not in an aversive state. She gets all her meals, she has bones, things like that. It's not going to be very effective to me by itself if I take her loose in the woods and there's like a rabbit or something out there. However, if I kept her very, very hungry, which there are dog trainers, for example, out there that do get in trouble for training dogs, and they make the news because someone gets their dog back and it's like skin and bones because they kept them so hungry in such an aversive environment in order to get the animal to reliably listen to some things around distractions, is we can get all kinds of side effects. And it's also been proven now as time goes on that these marine animals have a history of getting what's the equivalent of hangry and frustrated and killing the trainers, okay? These are not happy animals. So we can look at it similar to this, all right? This is the same picture, flipped way, flipped two different ways. It could, we can look at it, in a positive, beautiful way, or we can look at it in an ugly way, but it is what it is. Most effective training is going to have two sides, a state where the animal does not want to be, and a state where the animal wants to be emotionally. Now, I got some more charts over here for you. This is what I was explaining with the marine training. Generally, this is kind of like a pool of water with nothing in it, where the dog or the whale is always hungry. And we see the trainer with all these nice things for the dog, right? But this is really only effective if the dog is most of the day, most of its life is kept in an aversive state and waiting to get what it wants. And I learned a lot about this going to school. I originally went to a school for dog training with a competitive trainer, and they really showed me how to master this technique. Like, suddenly my pet dogs were kept in crates all day and they were always hungry. They were always deprived of play and food. So it made it so they were crazy when I took out a toy or I took out food, and I could get them to do all these behaviors. And so any of the training I did, which was labeled as we're using positive reinforcement, was actually, my dogs were kept in the most aversive states that I've ever had in my whole life growing up with dogs that hung out and were family dogs around. So yes, I was training with positive reinforcement, but was it very humane? No, it was not very humane if you look at it this way. And in my heart, trust your gut feeling, it just didn't feel right. Now, of course, you can have, another side I was talking about where you could train with positive reinforcement and do not keep a dog in a state where they are an aversive environment, where they have all the things they want in life, but then it's just a contest between what the dog would like to do more, right? And it would be such a beautiful thing if training was that easy, right? Just take out some treats and the dog is going to listen to us, but it doesn't work that way. And that's pretty obvious to everyone. The dog rather chase after the rabbit, it's going to chase after the rabbit. Maybe if the dog thought it was going to starve to death, or it's the first time it saw food all day and it doesn't think it's going to get another chance, the dog may listen in this situation, right? But you can't get around the science of it. Now, with what's not talked about a lot is how humane aversive training can be if it's done correctly. Here we see a dog in its little bubble of its world. It is with the owner often. It has toys, it has food. It's not really deprived of everything. But on the outside of the bubble, where we don't want the dog to be, is the aversiveness. Where do we want the dog not to be, right? We want the dog not to be doing something they're not supposed to be doing, being disobedient, especially when it comes to something that would affect their ability to spend quality time with the owner. Let's talk about invisible fence systems, right? Like, they sound so scary. If we talk about, here's the yard, and they get a big shock if they go on the outside of it. However, what if the inside of the yard, the dog has everything it loves? It has its owner, it has toys, its water bowl is in there, and it has very little reason to go out there. And it understands that it's bad to go out there, and it's going to get, they don't understand they're going to get hit by a car, but they understand that it's bad because they get a shock, something else dangerous, something they can understand. We teach them. Dogs generally, if they're trained correctly, get one or two really bad experiences for a moment, and then they have a lifetime of very, very good life with the family, right? Compared to a dog that may not do that type of training, and are trained with purely positive, reinforcement training. But don't get to go off leash, don't get to go inside of the yard, get to go less places with the owner, kept in a crate more, kept away from all kinds of things because there really are no consequences. So they tend to be away from the owner more and in a more aversive environment. And now we can also, of course, have aversive. So this is going to be a trainer that uses aversives even correctly, but generally is just not paying attention to the state of the dog during the day. These are like the dogs that are like, I hear this too often, dogs have to learn just to exist sometimes, and they're in a crate and there's nothing in there. And then if they bark or they're showing anxiety, they get punished with an aversive, sent back to the aversive state. This is like, something like this, if we're looking at not operant conditioning, but the quality of the dog's life is often a much better model of judging things about how humane training is. So there's really like 4 extremes of training, and there's going to be gray areas in between them. Now, to give an example of, let's see, a dog. So here we switch cameras here. You can see this is a picture of a dog that gets to be with their owner, right? Gets to be with their owner, is not hungry, is not deprived of anything like that. But also the dog, as part of the training, is also trained with aversives, where if they get a command, they have to do something. I always keep in mind, is it in the dog's best interest, right? So if I tell the dog, let me see, Yuri, place, good girl. And she's doing that because she's avoiding and aversive, but also because the flip side is safety and comfort. You know, we have a happy dog, right? She has a tab on her where if she didn't, I could give her a little tug on there, but there's really no reason for her to disobey. She knows when it happens. It's predictable, similar to how we understand what happens if we're driving in our car and if we break a rule and set a police officer. We're not scared to enjoy our lives and stay inside of the house in an aversive environment with nothing. We go and we enjoy our life, right? So I'll put a leash on her too, so we can work her with the tab, Yuri, and we can work her, Yuri, heel. I could work with a leash on her. Now, I was a former security dog handler as well as a trainer, and I had to handle security dogs for hours and hours and hours on long shifts, and the dog had to be obedient. But when the dog was being obedient, they were in a relaxed state all day, where they never had to be deprived of anything, and mostly listened because it was aversive to not listen. But being with me, this is the inside of the yard. The disobedience is the outside of the invisible fence, all right? The dog could get comfort all day long, and the dog, this is a traditional heel, by the way, where the dog walks behind me, where, Yuri, sit, good girl, all right? Where she does not ever really need to get punished, and if she does, she would know why it is, and you could do minimum amount, right? Yuri, down, down, good girl, all right? That's the aversive, all right? But I do not run out of this. The dog does not get deprived, and now we're talking about how humane training may be. You have to ask yourself, is it reasonable to think that this dog's life is really not that bad if they can go places with me, spend time with me, not have to be hungry, not have to be deprived of her toys or things to chew on, and that she is controlled, disobedience is controlled through aversiveness, versus everyday normal life being kept in a state of deprivation and aversiveness, similar to the killer whales. All right, all right. You're free. Good girl. She's tired. Good girl. You good girl. Good girl. All right. So I'm gonna go back to our charts over here, and to show you some things that you can look at. For more information, one, I have a lot of notes over here about the science of operant conditioning, which you are taught and which you are not taught, right, about the flip side. And also the fact that I kind of did this lecture is based off of sort of like extreme examples of one or the other, where in reality, most good dog training is going to involve both, right? I'm not just going to have my dog do things because she has to. I'm going to use positive reinforcement in training too. But training, if you map out operant conditioning and what they're feeling versus what the trainer is doing, it is very, very interesting and very, very powerful when you understand how to use aversive training and inducive training at the same time, and not think that anything really has to be extreme. And what you will discover is there is no effective dog trainer that is not using all four quadrants of operant conditioning. It does not exist. If you see a trainer doing very impressive things with their dog around distractions, they are all using four quadrants of operant conditioning, because that's just how the world works. All right, being humane is not based on quadrants. It's based on different things. Overusing things, being fair, being too extreme with stuff. All right, other things that are a lot more obvious when you see it for yourself. Besides this link, operantconditioning.info, if you go there, I also have links to other information, which is very pertinent, especially when it comes to political things in the dog training world and laws being made. Some of them over here, I got a link to the force-free, purely positive dog training marketing tactics, which are really unfair and I would say fraudulent. There's no such thing as force-free, basically. And you can go to this video. Issues that are happening in the veterinary community with misguiding the public, misguiding laws that are made based off of deciding what is humane training, based off of terminology and operant conditioning. And it is very good to know what Lima really is based off of the creator's own words, Stephen Lindsay, who has the only definition that actually makes sense and is sound and does not have some sort of like ulterior motive really based off of marketing or selling stuff. You know, you should really be well versed on those things. So operantconditioning.info for more information.